When I was 8 years old, I was basically told that I was going to be dying in fast forward, and I eventually had to learn how to smile about it. When you're diagnosed with a degenerative disease, it means that every day is going to be worse than the one before it. And that's a lot to process, especially when you're a kid and you should be looking forward to the rest of your life, getting hopefully better. I realize in retrospect that I did go through the 5 stages of grief in dealing with my diagnosis of losing my eyesight. Denial, anger, bargaining, which I did in a really strange way, very unlike the way that most people do it, and mine almost worked, followed by depression and acceptance. Phase 1, denial. It wasn't actually that hard for me to deny the fact that I'd been diagnosed with an eyesight disease that would eventually blind me because it was happening slowly. Not only was it happening slowly, but the doctors didn't even really know what was going on. I didn't have an actual prognosis. So in my house, we basically just went on with life as normal. I didn't go to a school for the blind. I didn't really change anything. It just eventually started getting large print books for school and then books on tape because I couldn't read them anymore. But for the most part, we were all just kind of pretending everything was going to be okay. Eventually, though, things were not okay, which led to phase 2, anger. Now, most teenage boys are angry to begin with, but in my case, there was an obvious trigger. It was to me, at least. Not like I was walking around angry all the time. I wasn't scowling and pissed at the world. I was actually pretty friendly, had a lot of friends, played sports, did well in school. Everything looked okay, but there was this underlying simmering grr. I remember very specifically when all my friends were getting ready to get their driver's permits, and I wasn't going to be able to do that. This was one of those times when it was driven home to me very poignantly that every day after the next one was going to be worse or harder for me, and all my friends had something to look forward to. They were going to be able to drive. I'd never be able to get a driver's license. More annoying to me was the fact that my father was a car dealer and really into cars, and I was never going to be able to drive. So yeah, that caused a lot of anger. It also manifested in a bunch of other smaller situations that wouldn't have made a lot of sense to people unless they knew me. Like me and my friends who go out to a restaurant that we'd never been to before, and everybody sits down and starts reading the menus, and I just kind of started to simmer and stew. It wasn't rational, but I was pissed that I couldn't read the menus like everyone else. Such a simple thing that people with good eyesight take for granted. So the anger over the fact that I didn't get to do things that basically everybody else I knew got to do was simmering for a long time, which led to bargaining. This is the phase in the 5 stages of grief when people either bargain with themselves or a higher power to change the thing that is causing them the grief. Now, I knew I wouldn't be able to change my eyesight. I wasn't going to will it back to 2020. But I thought if I could change the way that everyone in the world perceived me, that would make it better. This is when I went crazy trying to accomplish everything I possibly could. I was working out a lot and eventually started doing some modeling so maybe I could at least have a better body than all those other guys who had great eyesight. I was working exceptionally hard at work. I was working in radio as a production director and also beginning my burgeoning voiceover career. And I didn't just want to do some voiceovers here and there. I wanted to be like the best. If I was the best voiceover guy ever, then people would overlook the fact that I couldn't see, right? Now, everybody at one point or another says, oh, I should write a novel. And most people don't do it, but because I was in this bargaining phase, I did it. Not once, but 3 times. I sat down and plowed through 3 novels, all within the course of a year. 2 of them debuted at number 1 on Amazon, 1 of them debuted at number 5. And I was literally thinking to myself, if I'm a number 1 best-selling Amazon author, people won't remember that I'm blind, right? I did stand-up comedy for a while. If I'm funny, people won't remember that I'm blind. I started hosting some online entertainment shows. If I'm entertaining, people won't remember that I'm blind. And at the end of all of it, I'd won awards, I'd gotten accolades, I had a bunch of people looking at me for all of these things that I did, but I was still blind. I changed their perception of me for the most part, but at the end of every day, when I went back to an unfamiliar restaurant, just like I did when I was a teenager, I couldn't even read the damn menu. So that's when wonderful phase 4 came along, depression. This was that moment when everything, all I'd been doing for all those previous years just kind of collapsed in on me, and I realized that everything I did didn't make it so that I could actually see again, and that was the only thing I really wanted. The thing that I wanted was to be able to see. It's hard looking around and comparing yourself to everybody else all the time and feeling like you're lesser than. To me, whenever I was around another person, I was always comparing myself to them, and I would never come out on top in my own mind. I could do this, I could do that, I could accomplish this, I could show them that, but I was still the blind guy. It was depressing. Very, very depressing. Now, fortunately for me, this was about the time that I met Banana, and we were still living in the Boston area. She helped me find the 5th stage, acceptance. We actually met online, and my dating profile at the time read more like, I'm embarrassed to say this, but it read more like a resume. It was like, look at all these things I've done, and look at the life I can provide. Look at everything except for the fact that I can't see. Banana didn't look at or care about any of that stuff, though. We met, she just wanted to see how our chemistry was in person, and she liked me for me, despite the fact that at the time I could just barely even see her. Now, that was a very important part of the acceptance phase, but you can't get acceptance through someone else. You actually have to accept it yourself. And I think the first moment that I really did start to accept it happened after she and I had moved to San Diego and I'd started surfing. And I was sitting there one day on my board in the ocean with no idea what was happening around me. I didn't necessarily know when the waves were coming, and I would do my thing where I just kind of paddle last second, go crazy, try and find the wave because it's just coming up on me and that's how I react to it. And I was reverting back to that anger phase. I'm like, this sucks. I just wish I could see. All I want to do is be able to see the stupid ocean like everybody else out here. And it hit me, like, most obvious thing in the world. That wasn't gonna happen. I wasn't all of a sudden gonna get better eyesight. All the doctors who'd promised that they'd be able to fix my eyesight were not gonna suddenly come through for me. Acceptance. I had to accept it. I wasn't gonna be able to see again. So I took this big, deep breath out there on the ocean, sitting on my surfboard by myself with no one around, and just went, okay, that's it. 2 little letters. Okay, I accepted it. I couldn't see, but this is the life I've got, and if I'm gonna live it with any degree of happiness and joy, I had to accept it. From that moment on, I had a completely different perspective on life. That thing I was doing, constantly comparing myself to other people and trying to measure up to what I thought they were and how I thought they perceived me, that stopped. What good was that doing? Constantly comparing myself to other people and feeling like I was coming up short wasn't happening in their heads, and if it was, who cared? Not me. All it was doing to me was sending me back to that anger phase and then the depression phase and this bad loop. But once I accepted what was happening to me and decided that I was going to start living my life for me the best way that I could, the way I could, that's when I started living. Not only could I not compare myself to everybody else, but I couldn't also be looking into this imaginary future where maybe someday they're gonna fix my eyesight. That just puts you in this weird limbo phase where you're waiting for something to happen, which probably never will. Maybe it will. I don't know, but that's the point. You don't know. All you have to live for is the now, the here, this. And being the angry guy or the depressed guy because you got something horrible happening to you doesn't make the world around you better. It doesn't make people want to be friendly or help you or be around you. Nobody wants to be around an angry, pissed off guy. If you want to be a person that people want to be around, if you want to live a good life in the world with friends and family and people that love you, acceptance is the thing you need. Now, I'm not saying flip the switch and accept what's happening to you. It obviously took me, decades. I went through a lot to get there. I mean, this right here has been, probably close to a 9-minute journey, and thanks for taking it with me, by the way. But I stopped denying my disability, stopped being angry about it. I still bargain from time to time, and I still do get depressed, if I'm being completely honest. But at least now I do have that hard-fought-for foundation of acceptance behind that. So just because every day technically gets worse than the one before it because of a degenerative disorder, or just life bringing you closer to death, that doesn't mean that every day has to suck more. You have to take each day as it comes, accept what each day brings you, and try your best to bring as much joy out of each of those days that you possibly can.